Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We're in chapter 109, Surah Al-Kafirun, the disbelievers. Looking at verse number 1. Qul, root letters qawala, which means to say. It is a fi'l amr or command verb. The fa'il or the doer is anta, or the U1 male, which is hidden inside the verb. Ya ayyuha. The ya is your adatum nida, which is your vocative particle. Ayyuha would then be the munadi, which relates back to that. In terms of translation, is for the entire ya ayyuha, we just use O as in addressing somebody. Al-Kafirun plays the role of badal, which relates back to ayyuha, which means basically that it is just a substitute for ayyuha. Root letters of Al-Kafirun is kafara, which means to reject or disbelieve. But it is the active participle and it is also plural, which makes it disbelievers or rejectors. La is your harfu nafi, which is your negative particle. A'budu, root letters abada, which means to worship. It is the fi'l mudari form, which is your present future verb. The fa'il or doer is ana or I, which is indicated by the prefixed hamza. Ma is the maf'ulun bihi, or the done upon, which relates back to the verb, and this will be in fi mahalli nasb. The ma is also the ma mawsul, which gives rise to the sila to follow. Ta'buduna, root letters abada, which means to worship. It is in the fi'l mudari form, which is your present future verb. The fa'il or doer is represented by the waw nun, which means you, many, plural. And we know it's you and not they because of the prefix ta at the start. In terms of meaning, say, O disbelievers, I do not worship what you worship. Looking at verse number 3, wala, the waw is a vowel atifa or conjunction, which means and. The la is a harfu nafi or negative particle. Antum is a damir, which means you and represents the subject or mubtada, and it is in fi mahalli raf. Abiduna represents the khabar or news, which relates back to the subject. Root letters abada, which means to worship, but it is the active participle and it is also plural, which makes it worshippers. Then we've got ma mawsula, which results in a sila to follow, but it also, very interestingly in this case, relates back to abiduna as a maf'ulun bihi or done upon. Now normally our done upons or maf'ulun bihi only apply to verbs, but in this case it is actually a noun which has a done upon attached to it. And this will make ma fi mahalli nasb. A'budu, root letters abada, which means to worship. It is a fi'l mudari or present future verb. The fa'il or doer is ana, which is represented by the hamza, the prefixed hamza, which means I. Looking at the meaning of the entire verse, and you are not the ones to worship what I worship. Looking at verse number 4, wala, waw is a waw atifa or conjunction, which means and. The la is a harfu nafi or negative particle. Ana is your mubtada or subject, which is fi mahalli raf. Abidun is your khabar or news, which is in marfu. Root letters abada, which means to worship, but it is an active participle, singular, which makes it worshipper. Ma mausul, has a sila after it, but also it is the maf'ulun bihi, or the done upon, relating back to the noun, as we had in the verse before. Abattum, root letters abada, which means to worship. It is a fi'l, madin, or past tense verb. The fa'il is the attached damir to the verb, and it is tum, which means you, many males. Looking at the meaning of the verse. And I am not a worshipper of what you worshipped. Having a look at verse number 5, we've got wala. The waw is waw atifa, or conjunction, which means and. The la is a harf nafi, or negative particle. Antum is a mubtada, or subject, and it is in fi mahalli raf. Then we've got abiduna, which is your khabar, and is in marfu, and it relates back to your mubtada. Abiduna, abada, root letters, is your active participle, which is plural as well. So it is your worshippers. Then we've got a ma mausul with a sila, which is your relative noun. Then we've got ma relating back to abiduna as a maf'ulun bihi. So this is your done upon, and ma in translation is just what or which. A'budu, root letters abada, which means to worship. This is in your fi'l mudari or present future form. Your fa'il or doer is ana or I, which is represented by the prefix hamza. Looking at the verse, and you are not the worshippers of what I worship. Looking at verse number 6, we start off with lakum. This is a standard jar wa majrur concept. La means for and kum means you. And this relates via muta'alliq or attachment to the non-existent mubtada. Then we've got dinukum. Dinu is the khabar, which relates back to the non-existent mubtada. So it is the news. And it is in marfu. Kum is the mudaf ilay, which relates back to dinu, which is the mudaf, and has the hidden al or definiteness concept associated with it. Kum is in fi mahalli jar. Wa is a waw atifa or conjunction, which means and. Liya means is a standard jar wa majrur concept. Li means for, and ya means me. And this relates by a muta'alliq or attachment to the non-existent mubtada. Then we've got dini. Deen is your khabar or news, and it relates back to the non-existent mubtada, and it is in marfu. There's a ya which is missing at the end and indicates me, and it is the mudaf ilay, which relates back to deen, which is the mudaf and is the hidden al or definiteness concept associated with it. So looking at meaning, for you is your religion, and for me is my religion.